If Paul Pogba does not get it together, then he's just going to be in the same boat as Dele Alli, as Jesse Lingard, those type of players. This guy had the world at his fingertips, got banned for 4 years due to doping, and has essentially been given one final chance.
In your honor, I'm sorry.
He beat the case, and it's now or never for Pogba. So on February 29, 2024, Pogba was handed a 4-year ban from football as a result of a doping scandal. This came as a shock to many people in the footballing world, as you had this player in Pogba who had shown how great he really could be, falling to such lengths. The World Cup winner has such a unique profile that sees him being 6'3", a powerhouse in the midfield, with a technical ability that can rival anyone in the world. So when news broke of this 4-year ban, there was a collective feeling that this was going to be the end of the road for Pogba. And for those who have been around the channel, you'll know I even made a video about this topic earlier this year, essentially talking about how it was over for Pogba. His career is done, he's finished. Because a 4-year ban from football might as well be a life sentence because of how quickly things change in football. Midfielder dynamics, team dynamics, player profiles, everything changes so fast. So 4 years off the pitch at this point in your career, at this age, would have been the end of everything for him. Well, recently, on October 4th, 2024, news would break once again. This time we would find out that his 4-year ban would be shortened to just 18 months due to the fact that the Court of Arbitration for Sport had determined that essentially Pogba took the PEDs unintentionally, which is what Pogba had been saying from the beginning of this case. So with that being said, realistically, Pogba has one more chance to make it work. In football, narratives are make or break for football players. It either determines if they get seen as a top player or pretty much just some random bump. And for Pogba, he already has some massive stains on his career that have lost him a lot of credit. I love Pogba, but his career so far is full of squandered opportunities to take those next steps in regards to being an all-time midfielder. And of course, real quick boys, if you're enjoying the content, enjoying the video, don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. We're dropping weekly football videos, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss an upload. And if you're not new to the channel boys, welcome back. Glad to have you around for another video. I know I'm a little bit late to the Pogba's back party, but I was on vacation, so bear with me a little bit. With that being said boys, let's get into why this is Paul Pogba's final chance to make his career work. I'd say Pogba's real first chance to take those next steps in footballing discourse to be considered an all-time midfielder was when he came back to United in the 16-17 season. Despite coming through the youth ranks at United, Pogba would actually leave the club for Juventus at a young age, where he would start to become a household name. Along other elite midfielders like Marquisio, Pirlo, and Vidal, Pogba at Juventus was able to develop into a dazzling talent that was grabbing more and more attention by the minute. His eye-catching dribbling, physical presence in the midfield, precise passing were all attributes that made Pogba stand out greatly. Having helped Juventus to 4 Scudettos and even a Champions League final, Pogba's return to United for a then transfer record of 105 million euros felt like it was a win-win for both parties. Despite United having to spin the block on a player who they just employed not that long ago, at the end of the day they were still signing this elite midfield talent that could be a piece for them to build around for years to come. For Pogba, this was his chance to come into a much more competitive league, to a side that had been not so dominant in recent years, and create an impact large enough to where his name would demand being talked about when discussing the greats. And yet as time went on for Pogba at United, things just kind of seemed to get worse and worse for the Frenchman. His first season at the club was undoubtedly his best one, and when you take a microscope to this season, you can really see why. So Pogba's return to United saw him linking up with talents like Ibrahimovic, a younger Martial, and a veteran Wayne Rooney. Additionally, this was also the season where pre-washed Mourinho would take the reins at United, so they were bound to find some success. And this would come for Pogba and United in the form of an EFL Cup and also a Europa League trophy. Not a bad return in the first season for Pogba and for Mourinho. Pogba's numbers this season closely match his final season at Juventus, which had been his best season to date. But the thing with Pogba is that he isn't necessarily a numbers player. More so, he's the type of player who dictates a game and is able to control matches without racking up a ton of goals or assists. So from a performance standpoint, this would also collectively be his best season, as he would average a 7.66 rating in the Premier League alone. As the years went on, it felt like it was just diminishing returns from Pogba and this United side, as it always just felt like they were coming up short. Either that or getting absolutely embarrassed. His second season at the club did see his assist numbers improve, but injuries prevented him from even getting into a real flow. His third season at the club saw him fall out with Mourinho massively Italy, but it would ultimately be Mourinho who got the boot instead of Pogba. Ole would come in to steady the ship, and at first Ole Ball saw the team playing great football, which was much more attacking than Mourinho's, and this saw Pogba put up his best numbers to date. So in the following season, one would expect Pogba to kick on and really dominate the league. Well, he would miss 39 games due to injury. When the club needed him the most, he vanished. At this point, it became a real worry point because 39 games to miss due to injury is a lot, but nonetheless, he carried on. And his last 2 seasons with the club saw more of the same from both parties, Pogba and United. Inconsistent and injury-riddled seasons from Pogba, and a clown show of a club which also prevented any major progress on the field. Most people will say Pogba's time at United was a disaster. I won't because I love Pogba, but people will say this because he had his chance to take over this team and take over a league, and despite a handful of brilliant performances and let's say maybe 2 good seasons, he was never really able to accomplish this. It felt like a huge letdown, especially for a guy who had this 105 million price tag following behind him everywhere he went. However, to defend Pogba a little bit, it was a two-way street. United time after time failed to back managers who were making good progress, thus preventing Pogba to get proper reinforcements that he needed to be at his best. When it comes to his performances on the pitch, it always just felt like there was a lot to be left desired from Pogba. And as we now know, the guy didn't even want to be at the club by his final season there, which probably impacted his performances even more. Ultimately, Pogba missed his chance to become an all-timer and would leave the club deemed a failure. Had he taken over the Premier League, had he drugged this United side back to glory, we'd be having different conversations. But in the eyes of the masses, the narrative was, and still continues to be, that Pogba failed drastically at United. So it was felt that by leaving the club, Pogba would have a second chance to kick off his career and show the world that the same guy who took over the 2018 World Cup was still in there somewhere. I mean, at the end of the day, like I said, it was a two-way street, so people did want to see what Pogba could do outside of that horribly ran United side. Well, Pogba would ultimately rejoin Juventus on a free transfer for the 22-23 season. Unfortunately for the Frenchman, he was joining a pretty lackluster Juventus team that was still facing the effects of having to pay Ronaldo so much money. So because of this Juventus side was unrecognizable. It was a team filled with bums, if I'm just being honest, right? Everyone saw this team and said, what the heck happened to Juventus? So he was probably joining them at their lowest point. Why he decided to go here instead of probably anywhere else he could have is a mystery. Yes, his stock was probably the lowest it had ever been, but I'm sure he could have gone anywhere else and maybe his career pans out a little bit different. However, with the addition of Paul Pogba, there was hope that maybe things could turn around. At the end of the day, this was the same guy who years ago was tearing this league apart, and he was coming back with more experience this time around. So as I mentioned, this was well and truly his second chance to come into a league, come into a new team, and just dominate, take over, and drag this team to success. And while in his first season back with Juventus, Pogba would miss 42 games due to injury alone. That is abysmal. The guy had just missed 39 games not too long ago, and now he's missing 42. Things never looked bleaker for Pogba. But you know what? Give him the benefit of the doubt. Injuries happen all the time. It can happen to anybody. There's always next season. You take what you learned from the squad that you had at your disposal. You let Pogba recover, and next season let things marinate. See what Pogba can do in this side to see how you can really get going. And then all of a sudden, boom, Pogba gets hit with the 4-year ban due to doping. So just like that, in the blink of an eye, Pogba's second chance to revive his career flashed away right before him. So that more or less takes us where we are now. Pogba will be returning to football by March of 2025, so we still have a couple of months until we see Paul Pogba stepping onto a football pitch. He's very keen to return to the pitch, and it seems like really at the moment, he really just wants to go wherever he's taken. It seems like he and Juventus have mutually agreed to terminate the contract, even though in an interview he said he's looking forward to going back to Juventus, but I think that's probably just more of a formality. I think honestly for Pogba at the moment, he kind of just wants to go wherever. Should he come back to United? Absolutely not. That would be the worst idea for both parties involved. That would be such a disaster for Pogba and United. I do not want to see that. He does not want to see that. I don't think anyone wants to see that. Well, you know what? My heart wants to see it a little bit because like I said, I love Pogba, but just my brain says no. It should not happen. There's a lot of places he could go. He could still go to a good Ligue 1 side. He could go to a good La Liga side. Ultimately, he hasn't been on a competitive pitch in 18 months, with still a lot of time to be away from football, but there's still also a lot of teams that could take Pogba. But he really needs to think about wherever he goes next because he really only has one season to make it work. As I've mentioned throughout this video, narratives matter so much, and there's already this huge disdain for Pogba and his career so far, despite the fact that he won that World Cup in such a dominant fashion. If he isn't able to capitalize on wherever he ends up next, he's done for. Honestly, he's not going to get a 4th, 5th chance. He might still have a good season somewhere down the line. But this is really make or break for Pogba. It's now or never. He has to really lock in and make sure wherever he's going next is the optimal place to go to for himself and also for whatever team he's joining. So best of luck to Pogba. I hope he's able to recover and maybe he can even step onto the pitch for the 2026 World Cup. But who are we kidding? The media is still going to cover his haircuts more than anything he does on the pitch.